He was a sophomore in Milton High School. He's a lacrosse player, and he was a special person for a variety of reasons. But there were three things in Parker that we tried to capture in what we call the Legacy Lacrosse Cup. Number one is we wanted to create a very competitive lacrosse event. Parker would compete over dinner, he would compete over food, he would compete over anything, grades, girls, cars, you name it. So we just thought, let's create an environment where we have the highest power ranking teams from around the country, typically state champions. This is for boys and for boys teams and women, because he loved women. Number two, we want to create camaraderie. And one of the things we did is we create an environment where teams are hanging out with other teams. Boys are meeting with the girls and hanging out. We even do speed dating and things like that on the Friday night to make it really fun. And then the third component is character. And we'll typically have a keynote speaker to talk about that, and we usually have a theme for each year. So this year we've got Joe Ehrman, who, if you've never heard of Joe, you probably have from his coaching stuff. He's our speaker, and we're very excited to have him here. It's April 25th and 6th, okay? It's at Milton High School. Mercer is going to be playing the Bellarmine at 3 o'clock on that Saturday. We're going to send out to you guys the link to the website, so if you want to look at the dates again and the schedule, you'll have it. And one of the things we do at the event is we always hand out cards, because we know these guys are knuckleheads, or as the coach called them, monkeys. It's hard to get them to think too far ahead. So one of the things we do is we give them cards. And we give them these cards to either put on their dashboard or their mirror or somewhere. And the goal is to think about the decisions they're making today are going to dictate and direct the direction of their lives so that they end up at the destination they want. And that's a fairly complicated concept for a 17 or 18-year-old in high school, but we kind of break it down and we try to give them a card, give them a few techniques and things to help them think beyond Friday night, the next Saturday, or they're going 3 rows over. So that's the Legacy of Lacrosse Cup in a real simple summary. We would love for you guys to have your teams come, be fans in the stadium. We have Kyle Harrison comes every year. He hangs out with everybody and talks. He'll talk lacrosse. He'll talk about anything. It's just a great event. And so we just want to make sure you, the lacrosse community, are aware of it. We'd like you to be there and enjoy it. Thank you.
Don't you have Mercer come and play?
Mercer's at 3 o'clock on Saturday. That's right. Shameless promoter. I love it.
I was watching the booth go away. It's my pleasure. Coach Rieger had a good idea that we go over the rules changes, points of emphasis. My good friend Lynn Hunsucker, who's president of the GLOA, he was a member of lacrosse for 12 years. Did play lacrosse in college, like college football, but he's now one of the top referees in the state. Any of you guys are certified. You guys are certified, but if you're not certified and you want to be humble, get certified in the Rebel High School game, because at any point in time, half the people hate you. Half the coaches hate you.
And you're a popular guy.
Players are allowed to make mistakes. Coaches can make mistakes. Have a referee make one mistake. So I did that. I repped for 3 years. One of the best guys to reference was Landers, because I made my share of mistakes. And he would nicely come over and say, well, you might have been wrong. So he's one of the best reference things.
All right, well, I appreciate your time. Hey, again, my name is Landon Hunsucker. I'm the newly instituted president of Gloa. Many of you guys have probably worked with the likes of Damien Cavanaugh. You probably know Patrick Joyce, who does a lot of our signing. He's our head designer. You probably worked with Peter Fleury, who also does our treasurer and Century Bills. So those are all the leadership of Gloa. And what Mike is asking me to do is kind of come in and talk to you a little bit about 2014 changes and the rules and all the things that go along with that. And certainly I want to open it up to questions and let you guys kind of get your input as well. This is kind of the official nightmare, we got one official against 100 coaches. But I just want to point out that if you look outside, the sun came out, so when the officials come on board, everything starts looking better. That's a joke. All right, so what I wanted to do is, since I've got all of you in one room, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about about, before I get started in the rules, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Gloa. And many of you know how we interact and how you guys get involved with getting officials from us. But what I'd like to do is talk to you a little bit about us and what are some of the things that we do. First off, it's our website. That's really kind of our portal, if you will, to you. That allows you to be able to send information back to us. So that's communications to us. Certainly you can send us email, but you can go on the website and provide feedback. There's actually officiating resources if you're interested in kind of what we're sharing out with our officials. You're welcome to look at our website. It's galacraft.com. I don't know, does anybody ever go there? I mean, we look at the connections to that website, and very few people attend it, but there's actually a lot of great information there. And that's how you can get information. That's how you want to become an official. That's how you can get involved there. So if someone, one of your parents or someone like that says, hey, I'd like to get involved, we actually we bring in a lot of officials that are officiating other sports, and we try to teach them the game of lacrosse. So we really are here to help grow the game and help get more knowledge out there. And certainly knowledge is what is power. I tell coaches that the best book that they should read this year is the 2014. Everybody got the 2014 rule book. Believe it or not, that is actually a good book. And I find that more coaches don't look at this book, but it's a very good resource. And then we want you to have feedback as soon as you owe it. This is how you do that as well. So one of the key areas here that I always like to point out from a coach's standpoint, at the bottom of the home page, there's actually a coach's link right here. So there's coaches at the very bottom. Coaches, you can contact Gloa, you can request officials. Most of you actually already submitted an officiating agreement. There's probably about 84 programs or so in that range. High school programs, and there's probably another 15 or 20 clubs and teams out there. That takes a lot of resources to kind of manage information between the association and the coaches. So, we want you to be aware that there are program directors. You're doing tournaments or other types of things. That's kind of our calendar. So I just kind of point those things out because that's actually a very key thing and how to deal with us. Another area is the arbiter. Now, typically, you're working with Patrick Joyce. He's our head assigner, and he is the guy that helps you get your schedules in. He's the guy that helps really with anything. I mean, he's kind of your point contact, if you will, throughout the year. Now, he's actually got a team of probably that group. Stuart Smith down on the south side, Tony Roush does a lot of the Cobb County stuff. Ryan Rose is our rules interpreter as well as he does a lot of the MGLO signing. So we actually got multiple assigners out there. Patrick Joyce is your primary contact. Now, and I just want you to point out that everybody knows how to log into Arbiter and get access to information, right? I mean, there's no problems with that. And that's how you actually have to put your schedule in. One of the things that we're doing this year, and we've traditionally been a high school only association. We've dabbled in youth assignment. Typically, we worked with ALA for the last couple of years. We do select league, but there's other groups that would do a lot of the youth, and even the actual program directors would actually manage their own officials. And so you have to go out and get. We're trying to get more youth out there and that kind of thing. But you'll probably start seeing us do a lot more of information out into the youth market, because one of the things that I don't know if you guys are aware, you guys have ever used Jim Westbrook, with the North Georgia officials. He actually is kind of stepping back a little bit, and what we've done as an association, we've agreed to take on a lot of the youth assigning that Jim Westbrook did in the past. So you may start seeing us come out. One of the things that we've always wanted to do is put 2 adults on a game. However, this year, as we start assigning you to that youth market, you're probably going to see 1 adult, 1 youth. And then there might be some games that we do 2 youth if it's a smaller game. At the youth level, you can only officiate 2 years above grade. So if you're 15, you can do 13 games.
There's got to be one gap.
So, okay. And another thing that I always like to point out, and this is something that coaches don't do, and I really encourage you guys to do it, is typically when we come to the game, the officials should give you some type of card. You know, he has a referee, has an umpire. The referee is typically the crew chief. He's the guy that hopefully is going to be able to answer the questions and do all the things that and be able to be that interactive point with you from a coach's standpoint. Be aware of that, because sometimes you're going to have a senior official, you're going to have a junior official. And just like you guys, when coaches are learning, sometimes you're going to find officials that are learning as well. So be aware of that. We certainly want to do that. And I really want you to be aware that in arbiter is actually how you rate this. You know, we get very few ratings back from coaches. Now, typically, you know when the coaches want to start rating the officials? When bad things start happening, right? I mean, when something didn't go right on the game or issues were coming up, and suddenly the coaches are standing up wanting to rate the officials. That's good. I mean, you've got to know about those things. Certainly we want you to know. We want to know about those things. However, it's also good to know if someone's doing something good or someone is helping or whatever the case might be. We'd love to have you do that. So be aware that through arbiter, you can also log in and rate the officials. And if you ever want to know who's going to be doing your game, you can log into arbiter and you will be able to see exactly the officials that will be coming to your game. So if you're not using arbiter, then you're really missing an impact that can be a value to you. That way, if you have any kind of issues with rain, we start to see issues where games get canceled. Primarily we want to go back to the assigner to do that. But if you can't get to the assigner, then the next step would be to get to the officials and find out that the game's going to be, let them know that there's going to be a change to the game or location or whatever the case might be. I would point out that we're certainly out there from a social standpoint too. We'd love to have you, like our Facebook page. Gordon, I don't know if you guys are aware, Gordon Corsetti has done an amazing job on the YouTube channel. If you're ever wondering what the standards are for officiating as far as signals, as far as positioning, as far as any of that, Gordon's actually done an amazing job with video. And then of course Facebook, that really lets you know what we're doing, when training's occurring. We've just started our first training this year. So the first training of the year was last week. And so we've already started bringing in a new group of officials and going. I would just like to point out these two funds here because this is something that we actually work with the Lacrosse Foundation on. Phil Tucker kind of manages these funds. And this is something that we as officials give back to the community. And this actually impacts you guys because I think it really is important for you to be aware of what's going on. So Ron Maloney was a charter member of Gloa. He's actually a Hall of Fame member with the Georgia Lacrosse Foundation. And he passed away in 2004. But we've actually put together a fund, the Ron Maloney Fund, that actually allows you guys to submit information to Gloa at the end of the season for scholarships. And these are scholarships to local camps. Typically, we partner with the Georgia Tech Lacrosse camp. They actually allow us to pay an overnight rate for that individual. So if you have someone that is really, maybe working hard to get better, maybe a little bit, if there's a disadvantage there, maybe there's a family issue or something like that would benefit from them attending a camp during the summer, we encourage you to submit a scholarship request to us at the end of the season. We always hand out those scholarships at the state championship games during each spring season. Believe it or not, we have a challenge getting coaches to submit applicants to that program. And last year, we put together, this shows that we've actually paid for over 40 boys over the last few years to attend these summer camps and different activities. So I really point that out because that's something that we really want to share with the coaching community. And if you guys got a deserving player that want to be part of that, feel free to work with. Damien Kavanaugh kind of manages that program. Kevin Miller is a little bit less likely. Typically what we do is he actually was also a founding member of Gloa, and that actually is a fund that we use to help train our internal folks. So at the end of the season, when they're wanting to go to Laredo training, that's a U.S. Lacrosse program, Laredo 2, Laredo 3, that's how we're trying to get officials better for you guys as you start working out and improving the game. So those are two funds that we really help drive. Another thing that I would like to point out is, certainly the Georgia chapter is a key part of where we're at today and the support we get. If you guys open up your 2014 rule book and you look on the inside page, it's like the second or third page in, you'll notice that these are the guys that set the rules for the Federation from year to year, okay? And believe it or not, we have a homegrown contact right in this list. And I always like to point it out. You'll notice here, this guy right here, does anybody know Eric Rudolph? Eric Rudolph actually is a Hall of Fame member here with the Georgia Foundation. He's also on the Gloa board, and I think he's also on the Georgia Foundation board too, if I'm not correct, if I'm not mistaken. So there's actually a great connection. And one of the things, a lot of the rules that you're going to see that we talked about today, we have an impact because we fed information to our rules interpreter, and Ryan works very close with Eric, and certainly Eric might be someone that you might get to know. I'm sure you already know Eric. And he actually was the District 5 rep for quite a while. He's kind of stepped back of that now that he's moved into the Federation, on the Federation Committee, Rules Committee. So, and the last, before we start getting into the rules, what I'd like to point out is we've actually identified Ryan as our primary rules interpreter. Now, I always like to tell people that he's not going to interpret it if it was a slash or not. That's a judgment issue. But if there is some question about how things are actually interpreted in the book, maybe you think it's one way and you're getting another definition of it from an official alternative way, you can use this email alias to be able to feel free to submit information to Ryan. Ryan will actually do a research of it and get information back to you and make a decision, and then we'll try to stick to that type of interpretation, okay? If you guys had any experience with that or any kind of effort to do that? You guys even know Ryan? Good guy to know. All right. So what we want to do is now transition over to the Federation points of emphasis. The points of emphasis this year are 8 specific rules. Now, who's actually received their books from U.S. Lacrosse? Did you in there get also a book that, I've got my packet here. So this Youth Rules and Best Practices Guidebook, did you guys see this as part of your information? This right here is something that I know they really put a lot of effort into, because in reality, the way that we're doing Federation might be slightly different than what we're focused on from a youth standpoint. So what we really are trying to do is define the youth game a little bit better. Certainly safety is an issue there. That's actually the emphasis that they're really wanting to put on. Properly worn equipment, I'll be honest with you, from an official standpoint, that's really a coach's, what's the one thing that the referee says to the coach first at the very beginning of the game? Are all of your players properly equipped? And guess what you have to say? Yes. If you want to play the game, you better say yes. Okay? So that is putting the onus of this issue back on you as a coach. You have to be aware of what is properly worn equipment, and you have to instruct your players on what that equipment is. All right? So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Slashing, it's one of those things, you give kids sticks and they let them run around on the field, guess what happens? They start swinging them a little crazy, And so slashing is something, and this year, I know this is going to turn into a little bit bigger issue as we get into the season, this concept of balls. So we'll talk about that a little bit more as we get into the presentations. So age-specific rules, I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but it's really high school age players, but for younger groups, we really are trying to focus on using this as our guideline, right? And if you're coaching really anything below the JV level, that's where this kind of plays into it. The JV and varsity level, we're going to stick to this book here, right? But so be aware of the differences between those. And then U.S. Lacrosse just established this as a way to get the word out. All right, so properly worn equipment. Typically, as an official, I'm not going to go out looking for trouble. If I see something glaring, if the guy has necklaces hanging off, on the outside of his jerseys, or he's got sweatbands wrapped around all his ankles or something like that, or around his calves, and all the things that bracelets on, they like to wear those like those strongs and stuff like that. That actually is a safety hazard, and we'll probably identify those things quickly and try to get them to the side. But the more specific issues, typically when we do a stick check at the beginning, we usually do them sometime during the game, kind of randomly, about 4. That's usually what our guideline is. Some days probably less than 4, some days it could be more than 4. But 4 is kind of our guideline. And in the past, we'd always do the end of the second quarter, end of the first quarter, and the end of the third quarter. Well, they're really trying to, last year, they really tried to focus on, hey, let's make sure that it's spread out. One of the things that we're also trying to do is, I would prefer not to get a shooter, personally. I don't typically tell them. Now, if an official comes up and grabs a shooter after a goal and he does a stick check on him, don't get mad at me, because we all are officials and sometimes we do things that maybe we shouldn't. But just be aware that those are guidelines that we're trying to teach our officials, that we'd rather not take goals away. That's not who our objectives are. So there's a couple other things that I want to point out. One of the biggest issues are mouthpieces. And really, what's the value of the mouthpiece? It helps with concussion, right? And so a lot of times they'll ask me, can I have a bottom-fitting mouthpiece, or and there are guidelines about the type of mouthpiece it is. It can't be clear. It has to be some type of variant of that, just so that we can see it. And in the hook. Every lacrosse player I know does the hook with the mouthpiece, right? Yeah. And typically what we're going to do is we're going to do a little preventative officiating. We're going to say, hey, number 3, get your mouthpiece in. And after about the second or third time, you're tired of telling number 3 to get the mouthpiece in. So usually, and unfortunately, and this is actually a difference between high school and college. So in college, you don't have a mouthpiece, it's a technical foul. You lose the ball. In high school, it's a magic dribble. You get a 1 minute, equivalent violation. So mouthpieces are very important, and safety is such a concern for the officials, and I'm sure the coaches. We hear it day in and day out. Please try to encourage your kids to wear the mouthpieces. Another thing, for some strange reason, shoulder pads always turn into a big discussion. They ask, well, is this shoulder pad legal or whatever? When I'm checking equipment, I usually put my hand on the shoulders. If I feel a shoulder pad, I'm going to typically be, okay, he's got a shoulder pad, and I can just assume it is manufactured and he hasn't altered it in any way. However, the areas that at the high school level and JV level during the spring, it's not as big of an issue because typically the jerseys are covered, and we're not looking for them. Now, if we put our hands up there and we can't feel anything, we might ask to see. But it's usually the spring games, rec games, all those where, you see those little strip of here and they have no covering over the shoulder here. So those are the things that we look for. And the rest of them, the sticks and cleats and all this stuff, we'll find it, we'll look for them. But, and of course, the 4 points of please try to encourage those kids. I know that they tend to pop open and we're constantly telling them, hey, button up, button up. We'll try to tell them at face-off and all the other things that all the times that we see it. From a slashing standpoint, so, you ever seen a kid do this? I thought that was a pretty good picture because I don't know if you guys are aware of this. You actually can get called for a slashing and not make contact. Now, does it happen very often? Probably not. But if a stick is out of control and over the top, and typically if the guy is running from behind, what's already happened? He's already gotten beaten. So it's usually that one last, okay, I'm beating you like one way or the other, right? And so if you see other times, but it's really important for us to be aware of control the stick checks. And usually, you know, the long sticks, those guys kind of coming up and waving their sticks up high, you know, that actually gets the officials like looking at it. If you're doing a control check, you're going to see a lot better guidance than that. All right, so here's the issue that from a ball standpoint, so this is, the stand actually is supposed to be on every ball that you play with at the high school level. Has everyone gone out and bought new balls? One hand. So this is the mentality that from an official standpoint, we have to start hitting one of those balls. Now, am I going to look at every single ball throughout every place in the field? I'm probably not going to. Now, there are some anal officials out there that might have that ability, and I'm going to try to coach them not to be so anal. You know, are we probably going to play with a ball that doesn't have this? I'm not going to say that. You know, it's directed to not play without a certified play. But we have to start a game with it. So please make sure you have a supply of certified balls for this season. Any questions on that?
Is there a difference between your state and NCAA specs of the ball?
As far as the construction of the balls, I don't think there's any difference. I mean, I'm sure there's standards that, you know, or specs that are mandated by the manufacturer. But I can tell you what they are.
You want to tell everybody why this came about?
What's that?
You want to tell everybody why this came about, why this season is the beginning of this?
I'll let you go ahead and tell me.
Well, I mean, it came down from Mount High. There's been lawsuits. Teams are using balls that are old. They don't have the squishiness or whatever you want to say, the compression. So this Noxie ball is, you know, it's not squishy, but it's got a suppleness to it, whereas the ball previously made, you've been using balls, you could have got them from China, I don't know where, but so there have been issues with kids getting hurt with these balls that are pretty much rock hard. So the whole standard, the Noxie safety standard, this year will be implemented and it will be followed. And again, this came down through lawsuits and all sorts of stuff over the past several years. So have some Noxie balls. Not to say you have to have 100 of them, but that's the ball that will be in play in all levels of lacrosse starting this year.
Just make sure that on the initial face-off, the ball that you use has that. Now, you didn't hear that from me as far as that, but that's kind of what we agreed as an association to. You know, we have to start out with that, right? All right, so that was really the emphasis for 2014. Really not a lot to do other than the ball issue. We tried to keep focus on those other areas. But now we're actually starting to talk about fairly significant rules changes. Now, for you guys that's been around the college game the last year or a couple of years, you're starting to see some of these already trickle down at the college level. Well, if you want to know what's going to happen at the high school level, you always have to look to that college program and see what kind of rules are being established, because a lot of times you'll start seeing that information flow down into the high school leagues and really start putting a focus on it. So first one, no substitution warrants, the expanded substitution area. You know, it's the whole objective of the game this year, and I know in college last year, quick restarts. You know, we want the game to flow. We don't want to have, you know, walls. We want to give the ability to allow the players to keep the game going. So balls, not only on the end lines, but essentially all the way around the field. And we'll talk more about that. the logos. You know, we're starting to see technology drift into the game. You know, football has always had that guy up in the press box. You know, you're probably starting to see a little bit more of that in lacrosse. And so they mandated some electronic, how to use electronic equipment on the field. I know a lot of you guys are concerned about player our uniforms and look and how that they, you know, numbering, that kind of thing. You know, all sides changed a little bit. There's some changes on the face-off. This right here is another area that is really being focused on. You know, we focused on, you know, the concussion has really been an issue for the last couple of years. It's focused, and we'll talk more about what we're going to be doing there. And then that kind of plays into that same thing, the targeting of the defensive player. Now, it's a mandate to start doing some of these penalties at, you know, 2 and 3 minutes. You're going to possibly have an issue with stacking the penalties. So there's some guidelines on how you can actually stack penalties if you have multiple people in the penalty box. And then a flag down slow whistle situation in the last 2 minutes. That's again a college thing that's happened in the last couple of years that now we're starting to see flow in. You know, and then official authority and crew size. I definitely want to talk to you guys about it. So real quickly, the no substitution horns. Everything's on the fly now, guys. So you still have to have a horn at the table to kind of end of period or notification to the officials. Those types of things still has to be available, but you're not going to be calling the horns. Everything's on the fly, again, an effort to keep the game moving forward. Is there any questions here about that? I mean, typically you've been doing this through all your rec leagues. You know, when you got running clock, you typically don't do horns anyway. It's just now we're starting to see it come into the hospital. And that was where I said that the horn has to be required. So this was the next one, special substitution area. So in the past it was 10 yards, right? Well now what's happened is this wing area is 20 yards. So now the coaches area starts another 5 yards on either side. So that's the area that we're focused on here. So this substitution area now is 20 yards wide, which means you got to spread the teams out. How many times have you gone to a game and you look over at the box and you just see a mesh of players together and you're not keeping the box clear? Well, in reality, I mean, it's an advantage. I mean, if you get, you know, if you're trying to sub guys on to this goal here, you've got another extra 5 yards that you can go down here. So use that. But the only way you use it is, one, the coaches got to stay out, and the players got to stay back. How many times you come into a site, first thing the officials are doing is setting up the sidelines, trying to give them room to set up on. I know some sidelines get very tight, and we'll work with those kind of issues. But you know, this is be aware when you're starting to mark your fields off and set up your cones. You know, another issue is we come in and we don't find cones out there. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cones required on the field. So substitution box, the midfield line, and then all 4 corners. Right? So be aware of that. This is actually something that happened last year, but we felt like we should at least mention it again this year, especially on the turf fields. When you get that logo in the center. Now, and this, I do football as well, and this is a big push from GHSA. GHSA has said that if we come onto the field and there's not shadow lines here, then we have to write a game report up. So we have to submit that into the state, and then they will contact you and say, you know, make the appropriate adjustments. Everybody understands what a shadow line is, right? It doesn't have to be a solid line. It can just be a dotted line or some way that we can see where the line extends through that logo. And I know a lot of people don't like messing up their logos and all those things, but that is something that we have to look for. We did it last year, and we're looking at it again this year. Another thing that we had issues with last year is, so it's, you know, soccer lines are actually 63 feet wide, and so in theory, that's illegal, because it's either 60 feet or the football field, which is 53 and 30 yards. or 60, that's not 60 feet, that's 60 feet. So our field width is supposed to be 60 yards. We've had several teams that just use the soccer, and it actually extends it 3.5 yards beyond what the legal limit is.
So what's the action? You cancel the game, or you just want?
No, we're not going to cancel the game on that. I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, we're going to play. What we typically would do is we have to file a report and send it to the state, and then you guys have to decide how you want to do it. I know last year Cobb County got one guy to do all the fields, and they went. There was some slight problems with that, with those alignments. We're going to still play. Theoretically, you could get a technical penalty for that, and you would lose the ball on your initial face-off. So, be aware that that's a possibility that can happen. Right? So, balls on the end lines and sidelines. Let's just go ahead and put all those up. So, in an effort to kind of keep the speed going, what we really want to do is, and this actually is a better picture here, I'll show you here. I'll go ahead and put all these out here. So what we're asking is, this is a guideline. I mean, we've always done 4 or 5 balls on each end line right here. What they're asking now is to provide balls along the far sideline as well as the near sideline, and have some type of supply of balls at the table as well. So we're asking that you have balls all the way around the field, whatever works best for you. I know the challenge is we have to put balls out and they go missing. So try to, while the game's going, it might be a benefit to have someone designated, maybe one of your youth players or one of your, somebody from your middle school or somebody like that. And they can actually be back here and help with balls because they, have a helmet on and that kind of thing. So there are some safety stipulations, but if we can get balls around the field, it just increases your ability to keep that game flowing. Any questions there? All right. I think this is your...
And I do have a question on that. So if over the course of the game, they're not being replenished and that's become an issue, I mean, we can take that to the officials and you'll correct that?
Yes. So that will
I'm talking about waiting.
I understand that. But we've had it happens even when we have balls on the end line. You would relay. We have our little touches to the flag, and we have our little indications back to our partner. Typically, it's that trail official that's talking to the coaches on the bench side. And sometimes if you're doing the lead and you can't, you're waiting while the guy runs all the way to the end line or all the way to the fence to get a ball, or he's looking around and can't find the ball. We try to avoid screaming across the field, "Coach, we need balls!" I mean, that's not that we don't want that to happen. But so we're trying to relay that information back to that trail official that's near the bench to notify the head coach, and it's the home team head coach responsibility to make sure that balls are available. And so if you get you get that guy running by the bench and say, "Coach, hey, I need balls. Can you help me out?" We're not trying to disrupt your game plan or anything like that. We just want to keep the game going. So I ask you to help us out when doing that.
I just have a quick question. Can you use, normally everybody tries to start off with new balls. Can you bring out the old balls? Because I'm just saying, if you checked out the latest prices on the case of balls and you're talking about 10 home games per se, or even 8 home games, that's 2 cases of balls that have 8 home games.
Right.
That you got to have brand new balls with, and not saying Stars Mill can't afford the cases, I got it, but there's programs around here that can't afford to keep pumping money into balls.
All I say, Coach, is do what you can to keep balls on the field.
All right.
And please have us obviously approve balls
Yeah, I got
to start the game. All right.
It goes back.
So, do you guys use much of this on electronic equipment, being able to have someone up in the stands or sharing? They're really just trying to get ahead of the curve here. As you start to see more and more need to communicate from the press box down to the coaches, or it's just the issues you can't communicate out in the field from the electronic equipment. I know in football, coaches are now coming out with iPads and we're bringing the players to the sidelines and showing them drills and showing them things that's going on in the game with their iPad. That's allowed. In football, we said you can't bring that on the field. You can show it on the sidelines, you can't bring it out on the center field. And one thing that I would caution, again, I've never had this, but I know in football was an issue where they're literally having video sent to their iPad. And they're come over here and yelling at the official going, hey, you need to look at this. Y'all screwed this up. Please don't do that. Don't try to come to us with an iPad showing us video in the middle of the game. Right? I know you guys wouldn't do that, but I'm just trying to help you guys out.
No.
All right, so from a uniform standpoint, so really things are starting to change and we start moving. This is a setup to this, because we know uniforms cost, I'm sure each of your programs, significant amounts of money. And then, if you order the uniform and this year and suddenly it becomes invalid next year, you don't want to hear that, right? So we're really trying to give us some warnings here, so that programs will come out with a 0, a 1, and a 2, and then a 0, double 0, double 1, and double 2. You won't be able to do that, right? So whether it's 0 or double 0, you can't. That's the same person, right? And then of course I shade, the Tim Tebow rule, I call it. Because Tim Tebow would put John whatever 316 something like that. But you don't want anything. You just want black. I don't think that's an issue. I don't see that. I've never seen that as an issue in the golf. But they want to make sure that you understand the rules on the numbering and eye shades. So that's a little bit of a change. All right, so offsides. How many times have you seen, so they're running down and there's 6-on-6 on the offensive side and for the goalie, and they haven't done their substitutions yet, and the coaches are screaming on, offsides, they're offsides. Well, officials are trained to count forward. Now, we all don't do that, but in reality, we should count forward. So when we're counting forward, we want to see 6 and 6 in the offensive pass for the goal. Right? And that's where our focus is going to be. And in the world of a two-man game, have we missed offsides? Yes. And if that's the worst call that you got all night long, I wouldn't be too upset. So offsides is it's not when you have 2 cues, it's only if you have 2 men. And the other thing is, this is a fairly significant change, what is the college rules, that now an offsides is not a free clear. So if you're behind if you haven't cleared yet, and you get offsides, start it back where the ball, where as soon as you get offsides, you drop the ball, and then you can pick it up right there and start. Quick start. So that's been the way it's been in college for years. Any questions on that? All right, so face-offs. So significant changes in face-offs as well. First off, this is an issue that we've seen going to college the last couple of years, well last year. If you're a face-off committee, or you're a face-off player, you can't have tape. Highlight there. You can't have tape on the throat of the stick. Now, this could be a big issue because kids love to wrap that tape around the stick, right? And why do you think that is? It probably has nothing to do with the functionality or anything like that. It's primarily an official's issue. We can't see if you're gripping the head of the stick because we can't see it different. Now, in college, they do a lot of definitions of the color of the tape, the color of the gloves. I mean, it has to be contrasting with the color of the gloves. So at least we haven't seen that yet. But what we will do is, and if you have sticks that you're concerned with, have them come to us before the game. We will do any kind of stick measurements that you want us to do, and it's all free. We don't, not going to be throwing flags or anything like that. So, middies especially, there's nothing wrong with telling your kids to see the officials before the game and have them check your stick. That doesn't mean that if we catch you in the middle, you're not allowed to say, coach, or official, or Mr. Official, that was checked before the game. Well, coach, evidently it was legal then, it's not legal now. Okay? So that's one issue. The next one is man down face-off. So you know how you always have a guy come up on, right, on a man down. That doesn't happen anymore. So you can't, you'll have to do a true man down face-off. Right? So you're not allowed to move up from the defense there or offense there. And then if the team has 2 players in front of the box, players may move up from the defensive area to take the face-off. So that would be the one scenario. Now let's hope that none of your programs get into that position. You have to bring that guy up to the face-off. But and then you guys can stay on sides too. So that's if he gets into the face-off, we can't cross him. So there you go. That's again, I would venture to say we very rarely see that scenario, but it could happen, and it's the fine process. All right, so here's the issue of check and love in the game. So we've seen this happen for the last 2 years. Really, the big focus on concussions, all the things that go along with that. We know we want to play a safe game, and that is a mandate from the official standpoint. We have to make it safe. Now, I know coaches love to yell, "You're letting this game get out of control. You're not calling tight enough," whatever the case might be. My philosophy on officiating is, and I tell all my officials, and I'll tell you that as well, is I'm going to try to call the loose ball stuff pretty quick. We'll go on with the loose ball. We'll get those stuff. The quicker we get that loose ball stuff, the less likely we're going to get, a guy kind of bowling through, trying to clear out the scrum, or some guy getting upset because he can't get to the ball, or whatever the case might be. So that's the message. That's the first message. I'm trying to do that. Secondarily, you have to be safe. So what happens is, does a stick or a helmet ever come in contact with the opposing player's head or neck area and not get a penalty? Yes. You're going to get some contact of a stick and a helmet in that upper area, shoulder, neck area, and it's not going to get called. Now, a couple of things that I always look for is I want to see, did he extend? Did he come in with his head down? Those are the things that I'm looking for to mandate this kind of call. And if there's an issue, so you can see here clearly that is not. He's got his arms fully extended, and he's up in the head and neck. Now, we know that this is called the fastest game on 2 feet. Things happen very quickly, and so when you're looking at video after the game, and you see that maybe he did extend and a call didn't get called, please let us know. I mean, there's nothing wrong with telling us, but we have to make a split decision call. And Mike was talking about how, you really ever want to get home and come out and officiate something. Honestly, it's like Jim Westbrook told me, you got to be a gunslinger. Shoot it, kill it, move on. Right? And we have to try to get that mentality in our officials. But you're making a split-second decision. Now, if it's over the top and everybody in the stands knows it's a penalty, I'm hoping we're going to get those. And our objective is to get those. But sometimes when it's marginal, or maybe I was locked out right at that point, there's a lot of things. There's only 2 guys covering 110 yards field. So that's one of the things that we need to improve on this year. So I encourage you guys to start using it, and that is it. Is there any questions on this?
Will there be any time that a contact with the head or neck will be a 1-minute penalty? To your point.
No. That if we're going to call that penalty.
So it's either going to be 0 or at least 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't clarify that. If we're going to call this penalty right here, and it's up in the head and neck, they have not given us any latitude now. We have to go straight to 2 minutes. So in the past, last year, if it was kind of a marginal, or maybe he he was riding and somehow he slipped up and came up and got called. You know, there might be a little discretion to do a 1 minute non-motion. This year, we have to go to 2 or 3 minutes. And so that was something brought up earlier, that suddenly we get 1 or 2 of those calls early in the game, and you end up, worrying about being kicked out now. That's 5 minutes of personal fouls, foul you out of the game.
What's the precipitation difference between the two?
What's that?
What's the precipitation difference between a 2 or a 3 minute motion?
The discretion. Or if I've already called a 2 minute on the guy, I'm probably going to go with 3 minutes the next time. And believe it or not, as an official, by the middle of the game, we identified somebody who's playing a little rough. I know you guys are surprised to hear that, but when we come in between the quarters, in between the half, I have actually heard an official say, you need to watch 23. Now, I'm not trying to target anybody, but everybody knows that. Greg might give away too many secrets.
I don't know why you have to pick out 23, but other than
Hey, you came out and you're just going to be official.
And that includes a...
Targeted defensive player. We're almost done here, guys. I apologize. So, same kind of thing. Now, what would you classify as a defensive player? I mean, if he's going for a ground ball here, and the guy just completely clears him out, even though it was straight on, that's a defensive player. A buddy pass, he came, or like the guy clearing, it's the same kind of thing, same kind of mentality on a shot, late shot or something like that, where the guy's clearing, and then the guy's ready to catch the pass, and boom, and he didn't see it coming. That is defenseless. Again, that's a discretionary call. That's why I appreciate everybody wants to be an official, because we get that's the issue. I mean, we suddenly have to make this split-second decision that was a defenseless call. We're going to go 2 minutes on that, and you have to live with this, guys. Bear with us on that. And it's what's that? Again, possible. I mean, if the guy's running and the guy kind of clears him out, he felt like he wasn't prepared to take that shot. It might be a call. Sometimes one of the things we really focus on in the past few years, those guys coming in off the box. The guy's clearing, the guy's getting clear, and he catches the ball, and then the guy comes off the box and just cleans his clock. That's never been acceptable, ever. The issue is now you're going to probably see a 2 to 3 minute non-release for that.
So, what's supposed to happen now? I mean, are we supposed to just tell them to stop, wait for them to land, and I mean, what are we supposed to?
Thank you. I'm good at coach. I give you the rules. You have to coach.
Okay.
I think you have to make them aware that is a potential penalty.
Okay.
I mean, clearly, if a kid sees that a guy's been over trying to get a ground ball, in one of his minds, he's thinking, I'm just going to get it. Because in football, or they have a little bit of football mentality, wouldn't y'all agree? Lacrosse is a finesse sport. Even though you see hits, you see big hits in it, it's really a finesse sport. It's not really meant to be focused on how hard I can get it done. The objective is to chart the ball, to get the ball out of the stick, not on the ground, or in one right on the touch, right?
Ben, I mean, you're looking for a collision. I mean, if a guy makes contact, that's not a problem.
No.
But you're going to be exercising some judgment on that, right?
I mean, if you see that and I hate to use this term, a lineup, because there's no definition in the rule book about a lineup. When coaches start yelling, he had more than 5 steps. Well, show me anywhere in this book that says that you're not allowed to take more than 5 steps. Yeah, there's no such thing. Now, in the youth rules, there are some guidelines there. You can't line people up. Now, in high school, hopefully we are aware enough of the game that we know when a kid is simply trying to inflict pain versus trying to play the game. Right? I mean, that's part of knowing the game and feeling it. Every one of our officials had that. Sometimes I lapse, or maybe I took my eye off the guy and I'm on trail and the lead, the transition, and I took the eye and I look back and he's killed. And then you're going, why didn't you get that? You don't want to say, oh, I didn't see it, coach. Well, it was right in front of me. Well, I have to do it over here.
I would ask, the only thing I would ask from a coach perspective, when you guys talk about enforcement of this, that you have to look at not so much what happens to the kid who got contacted, but what the kid who created contacted, because you do have big kids and small kids in high school, and because a kid flies 3 or 4 yards and lands on the ground, I don't think necessarily means that this kid was targeting him. He might have, basically bumped him. It's just a mass and physics thing going on. And I intend to coach my guys that they cannot blow people up in these situations that you have. In other words, they can't look at that as a chance to hit that kid. But we can't play the game and not have contact, so people are going to fall on the ground.
So it is a contact sport, no question.
Yeah, sometimes, man, you get situations where guys that may not have as much experience in initiating, it's kind of like the catch and runner home plate. If it's a big collision, it's got to be something. And you end up with stuff that's not. And that's frustrating from the standpoint when you go out of your way to make sure kids aren't cheap shot and they're playing smart and people are necessary. Then there's a big one that's legal, but somebody blows you up for 3 minutes when it shouldn't, and that's tough. So that would be one of the guys who get you guys to realize there are big collisions that can not result in penalty. Right.
Well, and I've asked this from you guys, is you guys are out there, we send officials out to, hundreds of assignments a week. So, Ed, now, are we going to get everything right? No. What I would like to do is, let's open the communication lines. A lot of times what happens is that it's festering throughout the season, and then when we get to the end of the season, and it's on the line, that kind of thing. If you could keep us informed, we have Huddle. If you have a Huddle account that you want to share video with us, or anything like that, and if you can approach us in a training method, okay, right, these guys probably over the top, and I wouldn't agree on those calls. That doesn't have to be adversarial. And so I really encourage you guys. I'm trying to keep the communications lines open, and let's try to get that information back to our association so that we can help educate, and if we have to bring that official in and look at the video, that would be a great opportunity to do that. Right?
What is the penalty for a flop? Because that's the next outcome. So if I'm going to start teaching my attackmen, as soon as you shoot, throw yourself on the ground. I mean, and that's unfortunately, it's happened in basketball, it's happened in every other sport.
Yeah, we've seen that over and over again. We know when there's a flop. Hopefully we do. It happens sometimes, when you set up kicks, the guy, does, amazing thing because he felt like he got hit a little bit, and he wants to try to get that unnecessary roughness call. So there's, you get a little push, and the guy decides he wants to see that he actually gets to move himself on the ground. Hopefully we understand if it's an acting job versus not. I can't say we always do, because we've got a lot of variety of officials out there. But if you're having problems, let us know. Try to let us know early and often. Right? I hope I'm not opening myself up into tons of video after reviews.
We can also see a lot more than the coaches can see from the sidelines. We can see a guy's helmet. We can see him lining up. We can see the intent. We can hear the chatter before the hit. We know often what the idea of somebody wanting to hit somebody is. And bottom line, you guys should always understand that when we're reffing, safety is the #1 thing. So we may call something that may not look like a dangerous hit to you guys, but we're trying to protect your players first. And that's what we're looking at first.
And the one thing I would say is, you as an official should understand what proper positioning is for officials. Now, one of the things we're really focused on is making sure our guys are in position, sticking to the mechanics, and that's a kind of appreciated terminology. So the mechanics of how we move up and down the field. You know, with two guys, we cover a lot of area. If we're in position, we should be able to make the calls, whether we're looking down the line, whether we're keeping our eye on the shooter, you know, on the inlines, those kind of things. We're down on the inline. I mean, if we're making a call and we're 20, 30, 40 yards away, then I would probably be upset too. But if I'm in position and I made the call and I'm sticking with it, at least respect that position. That's all I ask.
You know, you guys have good work with teams. Protocol for one rep to make all the calls.
Yeah, I mean, consistency is the issue, especially as you're bringing in new officials and getting things. You're going to get, and you may get, so a very senior level official with a junior level official who's learning and growing. You will get guys that might even throw flags over the other guys' area. You know, we're trying to keep the situation in control. But you know, two solid officials, you know, we should be able to have a fairly consistent game. And one of the things we're talking to our officials along the field is, you know, let's be consistent. You know, let's make sure that a foul is a foul. You know, we have this mentality of mice versus elephants. You know, if we start out at the beginning of the game and we're catching every little mice call that we have, and suddenly guess what happens? Is now even if the younger official made that call, the senior official suddenly now has to start calling to that level because we've set the precedent. So that's part of the training process we're trying to teach our officials is that let's make sure, you know, we always say the first foul should be a good one because that sets the tone for you as a coach to understand where the game's going to be called at. And hopefully we're going to stick to that guideline. I'm kind of opening up how our thought processes are. And, you know, Mike, you have any attitude, I know from your standpoint, you officiated and you see coaching from the standpoint. What would you suggest from a consistency standpoint? Is it the issue where one guy touches the helmet?
Yeah, I can tell you, all the refs in the southeast part of the United States, I've probably done 95% of them, and I've ref them probably 30% of them. No ref is out there making a call that he doesn't honestly feel is to protect the safety of the kid or doing this. You may disagree, you know, and I'm a little different as a coach. What I want to hear is, hey, Mike, I missed it, or I didn't see it, you know, but I think as a coach, you know, you have to understand that, you know, it's not about just 5 minutes. It might not even be about the game, even if it's a championship. It's about the kids. And that ref has big interest in protecting those kids. And honestly, coaches, I wouldn't be a bit surprised, and I talked to a lot of NCAA coaches, in 5 years, much to your chagrin, and Coach, where you at, man? I wouldn't be surprised in 5 years if there was no more body contact. And I talked to NCAA coaches and on the rules committee, Petro, all those guys, and nobody likes it, but there's no way to regulate the gray area. You know? I'm not saying it'll happen, I'm just saying it was fine.
So, anyway, I think the mentality, you're right. One of the things, we make mistakes, and we encourage our officials to be honest with the coach. You know, and it's one thing to say, Coach, I missed it. You probably get one of those a game. You know, you're allowed to come to the coach and say, sorry, we missed it. You know, we made a mistake. But if you're hearing that 4 and 5 and 6 times a game, something's seriously wrong, right? I mean, you get one, but you don't get more than one. That can't be yes, or, you know, it's like they'll give you one, but you know, and you're allowed to take that one. But when you start using that as your go-to statement, it doesn't work. All right, so here's the stacking penalties. So you can only have 3 players of the same team serve penalties at the same time. Now, have you guys ever seen a game that's had 4 or more people in the penalty box? It happens, believe it or not. Fourth or subsequent players displayed on the bench area for a spot to the box to open. So maximum number is 3. And then any penalty time does not start until the penalty time one of the 3 players is expired. So that's the stacking. So now, that was the concern we had earlier. It's like, okay, now we're getting a bunch of these 2 and 3 minute penalties going, and we're mandating that we have, if it's a slash, we call a slash. We're mandating that if it's a high hit, we have to call it 2 minutes or more. You can see how this could potentially turn into an issue on some of these teams. So, and then players waiting to serve their time cannot be released to the bowl, penalty area serve their time. Right? So, let's hope we don't have to deal with that very often, but the guidelines are there. And then finally, the flag down, slow whistle. That's kind of an officiating term. So you got the flag goes down, and we're in the last 2 minutes of the game, right? So in the final 2 minutes, the team will leave possessing the ball and it's over. Right, so officials will stop play and force penalty should a subsequent second defensive foul occur unless it's scoring play in. Again, they've opened up the definition of what an imminent scoring penalty, what a scoring opportunity is. Now, so you got a flag down, and typically you get another flag down that will stop the penalty, that will stop it. But unless they're ready to score. What your definition of ready to score might be different than what the officials' definition of ready to score is. So if he's got the ball at the top of the crease, the coach might think he's ready to score. But the official may look at it like, well, he's tied up, let's go ahead and stop it. So he's probably thinking, from a safety standpoint, or whatever the case might be. So, we'll see how all this works, but that second flag is what drives that. It will stop that. And then we just don't want people just fouling for the game possession. All right, so they've actually had a direction on what and when our officials take control. So the Federation mandated, they didn't, that's wrong, that term is too strong. They have recommended that all games be covered with 3 officials. I know in this area, costs and all the things that go into that has a big issue. So, but I want you guys to know that you can request. We have 2 or 3 programs that have said every one of our home games we want 3 people on our we talked about the challenges it is to cover 110 yards with a 2-man crew. And we'll still be doing a bunch of 2-man crews. However, please be aware, and we've actually gotten to the point now where we've done enough training that we have 3-man training crews that we can put on most of the games that we have. If you request the games you request. My mentality is, in this world, if it's a region game, it's a competitive game, if you know that there's going to be a lot of issues going on with that game, if the cost of that third official is a valid thing, and I promise that we're not going to send officials that need 3-man training. That was the other issue we've had questions on, is the coaches, they ask for a 3-man crew, and then they feel like, okay, it's a training exercise. And the third guy really wasn't a 3-man training official. We really want, if you request it, we will give you 3 guys that can talk to me. Okay, so, and then the last several years, that first round of games, we just never had enough officials to cover for 3-man. Well, this year we made a decision that all playoff games will have 3-man on. All right, so this has been an issue where, so the official walks off the field and he goes to the parking lot and the coaches are chasing him. You guys ever done that? Y'all have chased the officials out the parking lot. So We actually, they define that our authority now, if you come running at us and screaming at us at the parking lot, we probably could do something. Let's hope we don't try to. But it does extend our authority out there. And then it happens prior to the immediate playing facility, authorized to take appropriate action. I've never seen this in lacrosse, but I've seen it in football. We're walking off the field, and then, as they're shaking hands, a flag goes down. What do football officials do? Okay, we're gone. We're going to run to our car and not even look back. Theoretically, we could come back and have to do that here. Let's hope the coaches will handle that. I'm not looking to throw somebody out after the game's over and you got to shake hands.
We had an incident last year where we had a young gentleman who was using inappropriate language after the game was over during the line. He got through the flag and told the scores table what it was. And our question was, would that count towards 5 minutes to get them suspended from the next game in that scenario?
Yes.
Okay.
That is yes.
Okay, I was just wondering about the context.
And you know, if you foul out, you miss the next person, just 1 game, right?
Yeah.
Not two. Okay, I think all right, so, thank you. I'm so sorry. I went wrong there. I didn't have to pick this time. Mike's over here. You got us up so off the track. I really appreciate your time, sir. Any quick questions that I can come to you with? All right, well, thanks a lot.
Running behind. Before I let Coach Mike go in here, this event is sponsored by the Georgia Lacrosse Foundation, which is the Georgia chapter of U.S. Lacrosse. I'm sure the majority of you in this room are members of U.S. Lacrosse. If you are paying your dues, we get rebates back to the chapter. It helps us do more events like this. We're going to have another event like this, probably not next January, but maybe December or even in the fall. Probably make it, if you're a U.S. Lacrosse member, it's free. If you're not, we're going to ask you to pay. But please join U.S. Lacrosse. Please support our local chapter. It's very important. We want to have more events like this. Is there anybody in this room who hasn't been to Lax Coach Mike's site? Anybody? Not a single hand. Not a single hand. So everybody knows Mike Newsel, coach at Auburn War Eagle, also Coach McIntosh, the state championship game within 4 years. He's also director of coaching the comprehensive travel team. And he's a good friend of mine. He and I played against each other in May of 1974. My last name in high school, and they beat me. I was really close.
He remembers.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, listen, I can do this 2 ways. I got a ton of film, or we can stand here on a whiteboard. But let me get this started and share just a couple of things with you. I got to tell you how this all came about. Years and years ago, when I was coaching at McIntosh, even before Tom was the head coach, when Butch was the official school coach, I was working at camp with Bergman, and I'd been going to U.S. Lacrosse, and he said, you got to go to IMLCA, College Coaches Convention. And at that time, I didn't really invite high school guys. Make a long story short, I went. Anybody been to these conventions? Anybody here been to U.S. Lacrosse or IMLCA? Well, you know how it is, man. At the end of the first day, you got like 700 pages of notes. There's no way you can implement all the stuff you got, And my brain was just fried. And it was like a 5 o'clock session on a Saturday, and some guy was talking about zone defense, which I don't even like zone defense. So I was going to go to my room and rest up for the big night out, And I got one of those scenarios where I had an angel and a devil on your shoulder. You ever had this? And the angel's going, hey man, you came all the way, you should go to the last session. And the devil's going, forget the angel, man, we're going out tonight, you're old. You need to take a nap before you go anywhere, man. And the angel's going, shut up, because you owe it to